Ladies and gentlemen, stop everything you are doing right now because what just dropped out of Cleveland is the kind of story that does not simply generate conversation for a single news cycle and then dissolve quietly into the background of the offseason narrative. What just happened is a direct collision between what the Cleveland Browns front office said publicly just yesterday and what is now being reported today, and that collision is so jarring, so fundamentally disorienting for anyone who has been following this quarterback situation with honest attention, that it demands the most serious and most direct examination we have given anything coming out of this organization all offseason long. Because here is what we are being asked to process simultaneously. Yesterday, Andrew Berry, the general manager of the Cleveland Browns, went on record and stated clearly that he expects Shedeur Sanders to have more command over the offense. He was pushing back against the narrative being constructed around the quarterback competition. He was, in the plainest available language, defending his franchise quarterback and positioning him as the player the organization believes in and is building around. That was yesterday. Those words came out of the general manager's mouth yesterday and were reported, distributed, and absorbed by a Cleveland Browns fanbase that has been starving for exactly that kind of organizational clarity and directness about the direction of this team. And then today, Mary Kay Cabot reported that Deshaun Watson has taken the lead over Shedeur Sanders in the Browns quarterback competition and has the inside track to win it, going so far as to suggest that the organization should declare Watson QB1 immediately and let the first-team offense start operating around him without further delay. Read those two statements back to back and sit with the whiplash they produce, because the distance between what Andrew Berry said yesterday and what is being reported today is not a minor discrepancy in emphasis or framing. It is a fundamental contradiction that raises questions so serious and so uncomfortable that they cannot be answered with careful organizational language or diplomatic deflection. Either Andrew Berry said something yesterday that did not reflect the actual internal evaluation of this quarterback competition, or what is being reported today does not accurately represent the internal evaluation of this quarterback competition. Both of those possibilities are deeply problematic, and both of them deserve to be named directly rather than softened into something the Cleveland Browns fanbase can absorb without feeling the full weight of what it means. This is not a situation where reasonable people can look at two slightly different perspectives and conclude that both contain partial truth. This is a direct and irreconcilable contradiction between what the general manager said publicly and what a connected Cleveland Browns reporter is now publishing, and the source of that contradiction matters enormously because it determines who and what can actually be trusted in the information environment surrounding this franchise. The NFL world reacted. This did not stay quietly within the Cleveland media ecosystem and get processed without external scrutiny. Pat McAfee weighed in. Mel Kiper weighed in. Cleveland Browns reporters weighed in. Former players weighed in. The reaction was broad and it was loud, and it reflected a level of collective disbelief about what is being reported that should itself tell you something important about how this situation is being perceived by people who watch professional football for a living and who have seen enough organizational dysfunction to recognize its symptoms when they present themselves. Mel Kiper, to his credit, called it for what it is. The broader football media community, the voices who do not have Cleveland Browns press credentials to protect and Cleveland Browns organizational relationships to maintain, looked at this situation and reached a conclusion that the local reporting apparatus seems either unwilling or unable to articulate with the same directness.
Mary Kay.
That is the most improbable development we've seen in a long time, given the amount of time he's missed. You talk to quarterbacks that have torn an Achilles, it is a skill diminishing injury. He's done it twice. And when you talk to quarterbacks at the end of their careers, like the Brett Favres, the Dan Marinos, it's not their arm, it's their feet and their legs. And I would just be surprised, like when the bullets are flying and he has to show some short area quickness, movement in the pocket, I would just be surprised, given the amount of time that he has, that he could still move. I have no doubt that he could throw the ball effectively. Like, this offense should be way better, but I would just be surprised that Deshaun Watson could start and play at a high level for 17 games.
Mary Kay Cabot.
Start and play at a high level for 17 games. Shout out to the homeboy JK. He retweeted this. He says, Browns reporter lies. GM Berry crushes fake news. I expect Shedeur Sanders to have more of a command over offense. I don't know if Deshaun Watson. Now, this was just yesterday.
Since we've been here, and that'll hold true in the quarterback room. We're looking for performance. We like to keep at least 3 quarterbacks on the 53-man roster, provided that they they earned the spot, and another on the practice squad.
Where does Shedeur sit right now? What are your expectations for him this year?
To take another step and keep growing and learning. I think he's had a really nice offseason. He did a really nice job at voluntary minicamp. I think his improvements in decision-making and pocket management by the end of the year, and certainly what we've seen so far in a very short spring, have been positive. And I expect him to have more command of the offense and better ball security and situational awareness as we go into year 2.
Does Deshaun have an advantage over him?
I don't know that any player has an advantage. I think certainly experience helps. I wouldn't say that in and of itself gives any player an advantage. But at the end,
something is not right in Cleveland. And the something that is not right appears to be flowing from the same place that so many of the previous somethings have flowed from throughout this entire offseason. Because if Cleveland Browns executives are the ones feeding information to a reporter that directly contradicts what their own general manager said publicly just 24 hours earlier, then what we are witnessing is not a simple reporting error or a miscommunication between a journalist and her sources. What we are witnessing is an organization speaking out of multiple sides of its mouth simultaneously, with different people in positions of organizational authority sending completely incompatible messages about the most important decision this franchise has to make heading into the 2026 season. That is not media confusion. That is organizational dysfunction. And the distinction matters enormously. Let us be completely clear about what Mary Kay Cabot's reporting represents in the broader context of how this quarterback situation has been covered throughout this offseason. There has been a persistent pattern, documented and observable to anyone who has been paying consistent attention, of narrative construction around the Cleveland Browns quarterback competition that has not always aligned with what the observable evidence on the ground was actually showing. During minicamp, when Shedeur Sanders was first in 11-on-11 drills, when he was taking all the reps with the first team unit, when he was wearing the helmet camera and delivering precise throws to receivers including a dart to Isaiah Bond that had every observer buzzing, the reporting from certain corners of Cleveland media found ways to soften that development, to maintain the fiction of a genuinely open competition, to prevent the kind of clear and unambiguous positive narrative around Sanders from fully taking hold the way the actual practice evidence supported. And now, at a moment when Andrew Berry himself went on record in language that pushed back against the anti-Sanders narrative, a report surfaces suggesting Watson has the inside track on the starting job. The timing of that report is worth examining carefully. Because if your goal is to prevent the organizational momentum around Shedeur Sanders from crystallizing into a settled and permanent narrative, the moment to introduce contradicting information is precisely when the general manager has just moved to shut down the competing storyline. The moment to push the Watson narrative hardest is the moment when it is most threatened by clear and direct statements from the people running the organization. Whether that is what is happening here is a question that cannot be answered with certainty from the outside. What can be said with certainty is that the pattern of reporting around this quarterback situation, the persistent effort to maintain Watson's competitive standing in the narrative even as the on-field evidence and the organizational statements have repeatedly pointed in the other direction, has not served the interests of honest and accurate journalism.
Glad you're with me on Shedeur because I don't have many friends in this
Me and you, Todd. Me and you.
Yeah.
You tell Todd McShade. Now it's me and you. Okay?
Yeah, I know.
Todd.
I know. It's like I don't get it. I really don't understand what's going on with Shedeur. I don't understand why people just want to keep the hating and hating and hating. It's like I don't get it. I mean, leave the kid alone, please.
Totally
I mean, come
agree.
on.
Totally
They won't
agree.
give this kid. They won't give him any credit for anything he did. They bring up QBR. I got a name for QBR, and I won't repeat what it is. But I'm not going to say what I say to everybody else on the air. But it doesn't mean anything to me. None of this stuff means that you watch. There was an article where Kuiper's talking about Sanders. Do you even watch the games? Yeah, I watch them. Do you? Is what I would say to that guy. Do you? I watched every snap Shedeur had. You obviously didn't. I'm talking about the guy that wrote that article. He obviously didn't. He looked at QBR, looked at whatever nonsense he wanted to look at, and he made his determination. He didn't watch every snap. We did, right? We did. And I know I did.
Yep.
And I saw every play he made. I saw everything. There's going to be some good, bad, and ugly, but there was a lot of pretty.
It has served some other interest, and the people feeding information to reporters who are then publishing it in ways that contradict what the general manager said publicly deserve to be called out for what they are doing. If Cleveland Browns executives are telling Mary Kay Cabot that Watson is winning this competition, then the question that demands immediate and direct answer is this: which Cleveland Browns executives? Because if it is not the head coach and it is not the general manager, if the voices pushing the Watson narrative within the organization are operating outside the football decision-making structure that Monken and Berry represent, then what we are looking at is ownership-level interference in a quarterback competition that the football people responsible for building this team have been trying to manage with the kind of clarity and transparency that the situation and the franchise quarterback deserve. That is the scenario that would confirm what has been suspected throughout this entire offseason about where some of the anti-Sanders organizational noise is actually originating. And if that is what is happening, if the information being fed to reporters to create this Watson narrative is coming from people with ownership-level access rather than coaching staff-level access, then Todd Monken's position within this organization is far more precarious and far less empowered than his public statements and his practice field decisions have suggested. Because here is the brutal truth of this situation stated in the plainest possible terms. If Deshaun Watson is actually winning this quarterback competition based on what has happened during organized team activities and voluntary minicamp, then Todd Monken putting Sanders first in 11 on 11 drills on the first day of minicamp was a lie. The helmet camera deployed on Sanders as an evaluative tool was theater. Andrew Berry's statement yesterday about expecting Sanders to have more command of the offense was misdirection. And the entire offensive infrastructure assembled during this draft, Spencer Fano selected at number 9 specifically to protect the franchise quarterback's blindside, the receiver room rebuilt with multiple draft picks designed to give a specific young quarterback the weapons he needs to succeed. All of it was constructed around a quarterback who apparently is not actually winning the job he was supposed to be developing into. That level of organizational dishonesty, if it is what is actually occurring, would represent a betrayal of the Cleveland Browns fan base that goes beyond any previous quarterback mismanagement in this franchise's recent history. Because this time, the fans were shown footage. They were shown the helmet camera clips. They were shown Sanders in the huddle with the first team unit.
It's disappointing to me that all we had was a week of practices and already now the narrative is flipped. And I'm not saying that Mary Kay's wrong. I think Mary Kay's dead on, and I think she's getting it from people that are telling her what's going on. It is very disappointing to me that Shedeur felt like he never had a real shot in this. I don't love that it happened this quickly. At least humor me and make it seem like a quarterback competition instead of what this is being delivered as, which is Deshaun after 3 days all of a sudden won the job.
Yeah, they've had 3 practices of install. Of course Deshaun's going to look better. He's done install more than Shedeur. Shedeur has yet to do an install.
Yeah.
He didn't get reps last year. Okay? So, and I think I've said it with you guys. I've certainly said it on other shows. Like, this isn't a surprise. This isn't a revelation. Deshaun is inevitably going to look like the better quarterback during the offseason program. No questions about it, because he's been through it.
Yes.
They were given specific and detailed organizational statements from the general manager himself. And then, if this reporting is accurate, they were being lied to through all of it. But here is the important qualifier that honesty demands be acknowledged. We do not know with certainty which version of reality is accurate right now. We know what Andrew Berry said yesterday. We know what Mary Kay Cabot is reporting today. We know that those two things cannot both be true simultaneously. And we know that the NFL world, including national voices with no Cleveland axe to grind, reacted to today's report with the kind of widespread skepticism that suggests the football community at large does not find it credible that Watson is genuinely outperforming Sanders in a competition that the coaching staff has been publicly managing around Sanders' development. What we know with absolute certainty is that the trust between the Cleveland Browns organization and its fan base is being tested right now at a level that has not been reached at any previous point in this entire offseason. If this report is accurate, that trust is gone. Berry said one thing yesterday and the organization was saying something completely different to reporters today, and the contradiction between those two things is too large and too fundamental to be explained away with organizational nuance or journalistic interpretation differences. If this report is not accurate, if Mary Kay Cabot's sources are not providing her with information that reflects the genuine internal evaluation of
what they are seeing right now, they are making this decision based on performance alone. They're not making this decision based on quarterback development, and they're not making it based on what they need in next year's draft. They're looking out there and they're making their decision based on who is going to give them the best chance to win games this season. And what they are seeing right now in practice, and what I actually saw on the first day of voluntary minicamp that was open to the media, was I saw what looked to me like a quality starting quarterback out there in Deshaun Watson, someone who had done the job before, understands it, operated efficiently. He was, and I wrote that day, that I wrote that he won day one. And then he came back on the days that were closed to us, and he had ended up earning the starting reps. And he was going first based on what they had seen. And so what I've been hearing is that he emerged from that voluntary minicamp ahead of Shedeur Sanders. And at this point right now, he has the inside track to win the starting job. And I just tweeted after I wrote that breaking news, after that I just said, if that's going to be the case, then you might as well just go and declare him that sooner than later, as soon as possible, because they've got to get this first team offense working together. They cannot wait until the end of training camp to let those guys cook and get all their work together. It's got to start happening now if they want to look like a functional offense in 2026.
Coaching staff that is responsible for making this decision, then the Cleveland Browns have a serious and urgent internal information management problem that is actively damaging their franchise quarterback's development environment, their organizational credibility with the fan base, and their ability to execute the coaching staff's vision. Without interference from people within the organization who are pursuing a different outcome than the football people responsible for winning games. Either way, something is deeply wrong in Cleveland right now. And the people who are responsible for it, whether they are mismanaging the information environment deliberately or whether they are operating outside the boundaries of their organizational authority to push an agenda that the head coach and the general manager have not sanctioned, need to be identified and held accountable for what they are doing to a franchise that spent an entire draft weekend building something genuine and worthy of belief. Shedeur Sanders deserves better than this. He deserves an organization that speaks about his situation with one voice, with consistency, with the kind of commitment that his minicamp performance and his organizational investment have earned. The Cleveland Browns fan base deserves better than this. They deserve reporters who are publishing information that reflects reality rather than a narrative being constructed by sources with agendas that do not serve the interests of honest journalism or organizational transparency. The football world is watching. The reaction has been loud and it has been clear. And now it is time for the Cleveland Browns to decide which voice represents the actual truth of this situation and to communicate that truth with the directness and the consistency that this moment demands. Because right now, the only thing being communicated clearly is that somebody in Cleveland is not being straight. And until that changes, everything coming out of that organization is going to be filtered through the uncertainty that this contradiction has created. The clock is ticking. And Cleveland cannot afford to keep playing these games with the future of their franchise quarterback.